Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Collier. I want to welcome you to the Conquer with Chris, the podcast you don't want to miss. Today, my guest is Matthew Garner from Pheonix Rising United. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Hey, it's great to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Matthew has a great story, and we're going to let him tell that in a minute. But I want you to get your mindset is that you can create your own life based upon how you think and how you act. And we'll discuss that more in a moment. Matthew, I want to hear your favorite quote.
Yeah, so I'll make up my own quote here, Chris, because I believe that it's all about unique perspective, and I believe that when we truly let our light shine in the world, that's when we're ultimately making it a better place. So that's my personal quote.
That's great. I don't have one right now. I'll get back to you. We got all the broadcasts to go. I'll have one at the end, I'm sure. So, Matt, you grew up. You were born, and you were growing up. So, tell us a little bit about your life history, your background, how you grew up, where you're at, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, well, I grew up in the Toronto, Canada area, and I'm still here to this day. And I keep my sunny paradise background here to keep my spirits high during the winter months. And Canada's a wonderful place to be, and I've lived somewhere in the bouts of 2 hours, either east or west of the main city. So this is what it's been for me, and yeah, that's where I've spent my 33 years.
Wow, that's amazing. So you grew up there, and tell the people a little bit about your early life and growing up and becoming a teen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up with a lot of challenges, a lot of inner conflict. My parents divorced when I was 3, and I was always torn between both of them because they didn't divorce, in a friendly way. My mom had a lot of bitterness towards my dad, and I grew up with my mom predominantly, and visit my dad every couple weekends. So I'd had this kind of false perception of my dad in some respects from my mom, but I still wasn't that comfortable around my dad either. So when I go to his house, I'd be, equally have anxiety and discomfort. And so it's just this ping pong back and forth. And I did that for like 15 years, 14, 15 years. So a lot of inner challenges, a lot of inner conflict. Eventually, that led me into my teens where I did start finding some outlets to express that. And to begin with, I didn't do that in the healthiest of ways, to say the least.
So, yes. So you started doing unhealthy things that were unhealthy for you, and it took you down a path. Tell the people about your path that you journeyed down that wasn't so great.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had a lot of inner frustration and conflict and anger. So I started looking for ways to kind of relax and cool off. So one thing I started with when I was 17, I was using cannabis. And that also helped me kind of fit in more at school because prior to that, I, felt really socially isolated in a lot of ways as well. And, I didn't grow up in an environment where my mom had a lot of friends or family around a lot of the time. So it was, kind of isolating in some respects. There was family there at times, but, the idea is I didn't really fit in. And by using cannabis, I started to fit in. And then that led into, wanting to do other things. I had this underlying fascination with crime as well. And I looked, my main role model in those days, it wasn't Tony Robbins as it later became to be in some respects, but it was Tony Soprano. He was my main role model, and I had a fascination with this idea of crime and what does it mean to have that level of power and control. At least that was what it looked like on the outside. And of course, going through the experiences of that, growing up into my 20s, hanging out with the wrong crowd, looking for love in all the wrong places. I got into drinking and smoking every day. I got into experiencing different levels of crime, kind of financial based type of stuff, and learned and spent just enough time in there and learned that that wasn't the path I needed to go down, and had some close calls with the police, but thankfully learned my lessons and kind of just outgrew that sort of thing. And that's what took me into my early 20s where I had my next big wake up call.
And so that before we go into that wake up call, you were in school, right? Studying, and the wake up call. So tell them about the wake up call.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, at this time I'd gotten into college and university, and I was in University for criminology. So I had this fascination with crime all the way around, both on the, criminal side as well as the law enforcement side. And by this time I was 23. So this is just over 10 years ago on Labor Day weekend, 2010. And I was beginning my fourth year of criminology on this particular day. And I developed this behavior of drinking pretty well every day of the week. I'd smoke like a pack of cigarettes a day. So I was kind of still drinking and smoking, definitely got away more from the criminality. And so most of that crowd had left my life at that point. But I was driving home. I'd been drinking and speeding on the freeway. It was like 2 a.m. I was supposed to be in class like 6 hours later. And I get pulled over for speeding. And the situation that I was in with my studies is that I couldn't have any kind of traffic violation or certainly not any kind of criminal violation. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to get a career in law enforcement, which what the whole reason I was in school. So when I got pulled over, I'm like, well, I can't, get out of my car and, get arrested or anything like that because, that's not going to result in where I need to be going. So I knew that I had to kind of figure some way out of the situation, whatever that was going to be. And immediately this officer came up to the vehicle and he just demanded that I get out of the car. He said he could smell alcohol. So I'm like, well, there's not a lot of room for negotiation here, I'm thinking to myself. So instead, I refused. I said, I'm not getting out of the car. I lit a cigarette while I was remained seated in my vehicle. And that basically escalated to him trying to pull me out of my vehicle. He called for backup. Then he tried to pull me out of my vehicle. And then that escalated him just assaulting me on the side of the freeway. He tried to pull me out of my window initially because the window was down all the way. He grabbed me by my collar and tried to pull me out. And then that escalated him just going full fisticuffs to my face. And it was quite a surreal experience. Definitely didn't feel real in the time because all that adrenaline going through. But yeah, that was my first major wake-up call to realize, hey, I'm obviously not doing the right things. So, let me take the time to reflect and figure things out for myself.
And so there you made a conscious decision after that, I take it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the whole court process went through about a year and a half. So during that time, I had a lot of time to reflect. Finished the school, realized, criminal justice maybe it's not the industry that I want to go into after that experience. But also just realized, hey, you know what? I mean, prior to that, I knew I wasn't doing the right things. This gave me the opportunity to figure out what those were. And I just made that decision. I started getting into self-development. I eventually joined a mastermind group within a year and a half, 2 years after it happened, and just completely turned my life around by surrounding myself with more positive minded people.
Wow. 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 So what are the critical components that you took from there, right? What are the principles that you used to apply to your life to make those changes? Because I mean, a lot of people, you don't do that just cold turkey.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, I always knew I wasn't doing the right things. And when this happened, it gave me a lot of time to reflect. And the one thing that was about my inner voice, the intuition that we all have, but when we're consuming drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or hanging out with people that are negative, that voice gets very much diminished. So I wasn't really paying attention to it. But once I had that time to reflect, that voice started becoming a lot louder. I stopped smoking, stopped drinking, stopped using cannabis, all that sort of stuff. And as I did that, and then I started listening to these self-development audios, and I'm like, okay, there's definitely something being ignited within myself. And I just started following this inner magnetism, and I was starting to connect with people that I really related to at a deeper level, at a more spiritual level. And, one thing led to another. And eventually, I found myself not only like, getting great advice and getting great guidance, but eventually by 2014, I actually started coaching people and helping them with their own journeys.
Wow, that is tremendous.
Yeah.
So you start coaching and helping people and guiding people on their journey, on their transitions. So about that time, a couple years later, I would take it, you met somebody that became very important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was in 2015. So probably about a year after I got into the coaching, I met Gail, my now late fiance, and I went through a really incredible journey with her. She was 19 years older than me. So she had a lot of life experience. Previously, she'd been married. She had a son who's now 24. So she had raised him. Had that whole life experience. And just the most caring, loving person I'd ever met. Bubbly, happy, super, fun loving. And it was like this karmic, soul destiny experience. Like there's really nothing that we could have done to stop meeting. And we ended up, being together for 5 years.
So you guys met each other. It was like love at first sight. It was like destined to be. And then you guys had something bad happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole thing was really serendipitous, even how we met. Like, I can't say that was necessarily love at first sight because, like, there was such an age difference, cultural difference, but the just through a series of circumstances and how we ended up meeting and all the signs of synchronicity basically led it to be what it was. And just another thing I really want to note about Gail is she empowered me to become the man that I now am and opened my heart to love in really profound ways. And what happened next, the experience you're asking about, is really what opened that up for me in a super deep way. In the fall of 2018, Gail was diagnosed with breast cancer, and that became a pivotal shift in our relationship, in our outlooks on life, and we experienced that ongoing journey for about 10 months, I'd say, where it went from like the beginning stages of that to when she ended up doing chemotherapy to subsequently doing a single mastectomy surgery, and actually got on top of it. And it was super aggressive, but she ended up having the surgery and having a recovery time. And when we made that through together and realized, hey, like this journey has, obviously been challenging, but if we can do this, we can do anything. That's when we decided to spend the rest of our lives together.
Wow. Wow. So, in other words, you guys proved your love to each other in this experience that might have tore a lot of people apart, right? And it's a very challenging, can be very stressful when you have a partner, a friend, a loved one going through a cancer situation. But then you guys had another incident, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And so, I mean, she did recover from that surgery, and we had a few really amazing months together, spent a lot of time together. Had this wonderful kind of getaway vacation during that time as well. But then in the right around Christmas time in 2019, she started having bone pain, and went to the hospital eventually, got some different scans. It was misdiagnosed twice as being related to like sciatic nerve, fractured bone. But on a third scan, it was diagnosed as being terminal cancer, which was around February of 2020. And she accepted that really well. I mean, she'd been worked through a lot of the fear and all the negative emotions during the breast cancer round. So by this time, it was like a deep level of acceptance of the situation, and cancer spread all through her body. And basically within like two and a half months of that diagnosis, she ended up passing away.
Oh, well, I'm sorry for your loss. And so, but you took that and re-energized yourself, use that to re-energize yourself to help others. Talk about that whole shift.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had the opportunity to go within. Obviously, there was a grieving period, sadness, contemplation. But really, I took it as a spiritual experience the whole way through and began to understand that this was Gail's role to play in my life. And it was subsequently very important for her too. And she gained a lot of self-reflection in her final days in the hospital. And, she's isolated because this happened all right around the time of the COVID lockdown. And then, I had a deep spiritual experience right the morning before she passed. She actually came to me in spirit, and I began to have a, consciousness communication with her. And not like a voice per se, but just through thoughts, through feelings, and realized, and this was the most profound awakening for me, Chris, was life goes on beyond the body. And, our consciousness is eternal. And despite, the physical Gail's gone, the non-physical Gail lives in many forms. And so through that experience and using that as a platform to rise above the ashes, hence the Pheonix Rising United platform, I began to realize, hey, I'm not a victim by any means. This has been something very powerful and important for me to experience. And from that standpoint, I can now, start helping others. And it took a couple months for me to get to that point. but I took my new spiritual gifts and experiences and began to weave it into helping other people improve their lives. And through them having a deeper level of connection to spirituality and source power, they began to heal themselves and they began to have greater success in business. And now it's branched more into leadership and community development for me.
That's great. That's great. And so in that, you just said you went into community development and leadership. So how are you using that to help others create their communities and their businesses and things like that?
Yeah, well, basically, the mission with Pheonix Rising United is to supply people with all the tools and resources in the community structure that they need in order to be 100% supported by their passion in life. So, what we do is we have a series of live classes that people come and attend. I host for them now, and then we have other teachers as well. And we basically leverage other experts and leaders and coaches. We leverage their skill sets as well as their networks, and we combine forces. And so rather than just we reach like one segment or one audience, we reach multiple. And we're part of a larger group that actually hosts 4,600 people in total in the community. And we have our own platform for hosting. We're developing our own social media network as well. And it's just a really cool space to play in and connect with like-hearted people.
Well, that's great. That's great. And if people don't know you and they're listening to this podcast, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, if they really want to experience what I'm talking about here with the whole idea of transformation, I call myself a personal transformation specialist, transforming that darkness, that negativity into light and positivity. And if they really want to get an idea and experience for what that is, they can check out pheonixrisingmasterclass.com. And I host my free masterclass. It's every Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, and people can come check it out. We go for about an hour and a half. And they'll actually start to feel what I'm talking about, where they get into these higher states of consciousness and these higher frequencies, and they actually witness transformation in their lives, often instantaneously, just based on their own emotional experience that they're having.
Wow. Wow. And so they can find you at Pheonix Rising United Masterclass.com, right?
If they just go pheonixrisingmasterclass.com to keep it nice and simple, then they'll absolutely find out all about the masterclass, and they can come check it out, and they can become a part of my network, and I'll share my gifts with them.
Oh man, that's so great. I want to thank my guest, Matthew, for being on today. Man, so much great information. And if you're watching this or listening to it, depending on what platform you're on, please like, share, subscribe, and download. Is there anything you want to leave the people with, Matthew?
Yeah, well, just another quote here. One of my favorites is this African proverb that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And basically what we've created here, the Pheonix Rising United community in my masterclass, is combining both, right? We want to go far as a community, but also using some of these processes that I've been trained in, help us really accelerate that process to the quantum level. And why not do both? We'll get there together, and we'll also do it faster.
Well, there you have it, folks. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Thanks for watching the Conquer Chris podcast, the podcast you don't want to miss. Have a great night.